Well, as we prepare to begin the second of our 2-hour James Hunt shows, the second one that we have had since we expanded the program, we do have a lot to come your way during today's program. In our next half hour, we're going to talk about the Tascosa High School situation and the UIL decision yesterday. Next hour, we'll be hearing from Corporal Jerry Neufeld with the Amarillo Police Department on the new crime report, which really looks pretty good for the city when crime is down 13%. But our first half hour today, our guest in the studio is Congressman Mac Thornberry. And want to let everybody know we normally have a commercial break about midway through this half hour. We have taken that out of today's program so that we have more time with the congressman who can be with us till about 9:30. And Congressman Thornberry, welcome to the James Hunt Show. Good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, and congratulations on your new expanded program.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Well, you are in, I guess you call this a district work period now. Is that the title?
Yeah. Congress does not have votes in Washington this week, and so that gives us a chance to be back home. Obviously, President's Day recess is kind of a traditional time that we have to be back home and visit with folks and get out of D.C. for a while.
Yeah. So what are you hearing from the constituents?
A lot of concern about where things are going, high gas prices, a lot of concern about where the political races are shaping, particularly the presidential race, and even more concern than normal, I think, about what's happening in the world. The situation with Iran and Syria, and there's a lot of turmoil going on right now, and so I think there's a lot of anxiety for a lot of good reasons.
Yeah, we've been watching Iran, I guess, since 1979. It has been on the U.S. radar, and it looms, and then it maybe diminishes as a concern. But here of late, obviously, it has greatly risen. What do you see on that situation? I mean, I guess one thing that I have thought, and I mentioned this yesterday on the program, I kind of feel like if Israel goes, we go too.
Yeah. Well, I think certainly Iran sees it that way. And so regardless of whether we tell Israel we're with them or not, if Israel decides that they cannot coexist with Iran, with an Iran that has nuclear weapons, and they take some sort of action, Iran will see us as right there with Israel. And so you could see all sorts of consequences to our troops in the region, to a variety of places in that area. Iran has lots of missiles that can go in a variety of different directions, and nobody knows for certain exactly where they are in their efforts to get a nuclear bomb, and so there's a lot of troublesome surroundings there, circumstances there, and at the same time, there's not any good answers, because it is not like Israel or the United States can drop a few bombs from some airplanes and take care of the problem. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and why does it not? Because a lot of people, they imagine that very scenario that you have said will not work.
Yeah. Partly because people have watched in other instances, and Iran, as others are burying things deeper and deeper underground. Partly because countries watch what's happened before, and they diffuse their installations out in a variety of places. We don't know for sure where all of the installations may be in Iran related to their nuclear program. And so it's possible, some people think it's possible that you could drop some bombs and set back their efforts. But as far as stopping their efforts or how far you'd set them back, there's a lot of question about that. The only real way to stop it is to invade the country, and I don't think anybody's suggesting that.
Okay, so I'm glad to know nobody's suggesting it, but if we were to truly, if there is a genuine threat from Iran, if we get to the point where we know they are fully capable nuclear-wise, if they ever reach that stage, would we have to have ground troops in Iran to take care of that?
Well, I think you would essentially have to have some folks on the ground in order to be sure you eradicated all of their program. And again, even that is hard. As we learned in Iraq, you can hide things, you can disguise things. It is very difficult to know for certain that you've eliminated a nuclear program like that. And so there are not good options here. But among the not good options is sitting back and doing nothing and letting Iran get a nuclear weapon and thereby encouraging Turkey and Saudi Arabia and a variety of other countries in the area to get their own nuclear weapon because they wouldn't want the Persians to have one without the Arabs having one, the Shia to have one without the Sunnis having one. And so you get into this escalation, and nobody knows where that could lead.
Right. And I know right now this international body, the IAEA, they're doing some sort of an evaluation, but you get a lot of information, most of which cannot be divulged in your role on the Intelligence Committee. But how likely is it that what Iran is doing nuclear-wise is all for peaceful purposes?
I think there is no chance of that. That's my opinion, and I don't think anybody would give it more than 1 or 2% chance that it's all peaceful with no. Now there are differences of opinion about how far they want to take it towards actually building a nuclear weapon, and at what stage they could stop. And there are clearly tensions within Iran, within the government, related to this topic in some ways. But clearly it's not just for peaceful purposes.
Congressman Mac Thornberry is our guest today on the James Hunt Show, and if you'd like to phone in, 320-0710 is the local number. Pathways toll-free long-distance number 1-800-285-0710. We're talking about a nuclear threat. There's another threat to our national security that you've been very involved with for years in trying to find ways to counter it. You're on this task force you were telling me about before going on the air. Let's talk about cybersecurity and this task force that you are I guess you're heading.
Yeah. Yes. Well, the Speaker asked me to lead this effort last year, and part of the problem is that cybersecurity touches so many different things in our lives. It also touches so many different committees in Congress. And so he appointed me to chair this task force and appointed representatives from 9 different committees to serve on it. And the idea was for us to establish a framework from which the House would operate and put specific legislative language together to deal with this cyber issue. So we issued our report late last fall. Now the committees are in the process of fleshing that out with specific legislation, and it's going to come to the floor sometime this spring. I think what a lot of people may not realize is that part of the cyber threat is economic, because every single day people reach in through the internet and steal intellectual property from businesses large and small. It's not just Lockheed Martin and defense contractors they're stealing from. It's small businesses too. And so when they steal intellectual property, they're stealing jobs from the United States. But in addition to that, it presents what most every military person I've talked to recently thinks is the biggest threat to our security here at home. And as a matter of fact, we had an open hearing in the Intelligence Committee week before last, and the director of the FBI says terrorism is still their number one, but very soon cybersecurity will surpass terrorism as their number one concern in the FBI. So from a security standpoint, from an economic standpoint, there is more and more focus, and there has to be, on this, while we maintain our privacy and our values. And it's getting all of that right that presents such a difficult challenge. So
what do you see as the potential impacts for just the average person, the common resident? I guess when I think in terms of cybersecurity, I can imagine there would have to be a lot done at the government level among its institutions, at the corporate level. But what about those of us just in our homes?
Well, there are things that we need to do in our homes, keeping our and what the people call it is good hygiene. It's kind of like washing your hands and, the basic things that you need to do to keep from catching a cold or the flu. So with computers, it's keeping your virus protection updated. It's keeping your firewall up. It's not clicking on emails when you don't know the sender, that sort of thing. But it is important because the less clutter, the less of that malware that we have on our personal computer, then there are fewer things for the real bad guys to hide in. And the thing that most people are most concerned about now is critical infrastructure, the electric grid, chemical plants, water treatment plants. And what we know is that through the internet, it is possible to go through and flip a switch or turn a valve And that can mean, for example, at a water treatment plant, that a lot of people are suddenly poisoned, that the electric grid in a certain part of the country goes down, that there's a chemical release that's unintended. And so those are the things from a physical security standpoint. The air traffic control system is another, that most people think should be the highest priority right now.
Okay, before we get to the calls, maybe just kind of as much as this can be put into capsule form, how do you grade our current national security? You get, as I mentioned a moment ago, you get all kinds of information the rest of us don't. So you're a real good guy to ask, how are we doing safety-wise?
This made an impression on me. Again, at open hearings, the Director of National Intelligence said in his 50-something years in national security, we have a greater number of complex, interdependent threats now than at any time he's seen over the last 50 years. And so I think that's about right, because when you add terrorism, which isn't going away, and cybersecurity we've just talked about, Iran, North Korea is volatile. You have China, we don't know how they're going to go. Russia's kind of in some flux right now. You still have tremendous drug cartel and all of that violence just to our south. And you just start adding these things up and the connectedness of them. It is a very complicated environment. Now, at the same time, we've got folks who have done incredibly good work since 9/11. FBI just stopped this guy from running into the Capitol last Friday to blow himself up, So a lot of professionals have done a lot of good work, but still it's a dangerous environment out there.
Okay, we're going to go to the phones, and as we do, let me say to the callers, please try to put your question in the form of a sentence so that we can move along, and we're going to begin. Let us go to David in Amarillo. Good morning, David. You're on the James Hunt Show with Congressman Mac Thornberry as our guest today.
Hi, how are y'all?
Doing well.
Mr. Thornberry, respectfully, I'm a retiring veteran, and I'm just curious as to currently with our situation, with all the threats we're facing, why does Congress want to cut defense spending?
Okay. Thank you, David.
That's a great question. Back in the middle of last year, part of the agreement on increasing the debt was to cut spending. Some of it came from defense, and basically what that means is defense would be flat. In other words, we would essentially spend about the same amount of money on defense for the next 5 years. And try to look for efficiencies and ways to get more out of the money that we spend. Now, there's a second round that could be coming, though, that everybody, including the Secretary of Defense, says would just be catastrophic, and that is this sequestration. So basically the military says, okay, this has been tough, what you've made us do so far, but we can live with it. We cannot live with a second round, which would take effect in January 2013, unless Congress acts to prevent it. And I think they're exactly right about that. This will be a major topic, I think, of discussion for the coming year about how much is too much to cut out of defense.
Okay, David, appreciate the call. Of course, defense spending, that's all part of this big budget mess that we have. How likely is it that we can resolve all these different issues that relate to the budget in this election year?
Not very likely.
Yeah.
I think what's more likely to happen is the House will pass a budget again this year and lay out a vision of how a majority of the House would like to do. The Senate will not pass a budget again for about the third or fourth year in a row, and basically things are going to be on automatic pilot till we get the election done. I mean, I think that's the most likely scenario. But it's going to be really important to look at that House budget, because that'll tell people what the direction that we would like to go in defense, Medicare, a whole host of areas.
Okay, let me ask you, because you have so many people in the district very much involved in agriculture. Of course, do you expect the Farm Bill? I don't see how, if we can't resolve really much of anything, I would imagine the Farm Bill's on the list of things that probably, even though it's due this year, we're not going to have a new Farm Bill. That's my speculation.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best guess. Now, the president's budget that came up a couple of weeks ago had some pretty big cuts in Farm Bill spending, but they were just cuts. They were not a whole new Farm Bill, like you say, which is what you need to do. You need to look at the whole picture at all the programs and how they fit together. So I think the chances of doing a new Farm Bill this year are not great. I think Chairman Frank Lucas, just across the border from us, is going to be ready to go if the opportunity arises. But the best chance is probably for some sort of extension of the existing farm bill, which is not so bad for our neck of the woods as far as the way it affects producers here.
Okay, so an extension might actually be a good thing. Another thing that has been argued as a good thing is that the more time taken before work on the farm bill is actually done, the more opportunity to educate those members of Congress who really don't understand agriculture. Are we at least buying that time?
Yeah, I do think that's true. I mean, you had 90 new freshmen who were elected for the first time, none of whom obviously have ever written a farm bill before, and a bunch of others who had never written a farm bill before. And so I think there is more time to help them understand the various issues involved. The other thing that's good is commodity groups are working together better than I have ever seen before. And because there are fewer and fewer of us representing agriculture, coming from rural areas, we all need to be on the same page, and they are doing a better job of that, as I say, than I've ever seen. That's good, and that's important.
Do you think enough has been accomplished in terms of establishing on the Hill that crop insurance is a necessity?
Not enough. But I think when you just look at the facts, and I've been trying to explain to people what kind of year we had last year, the truly historic nature of it, and the absolutely essential nature of crop insurance when you have the varieties of weather like we had last year. I think we're working on it, but I don't think we've done enough to explain just how crucial that is.
Yeah, that seems to have emerged as like the number one priority out in ag country of anything to try to preserve in the current program. Okay, we're going to go back to the phones. Again, remember, please try to ask your question in the form of a single sentence so that we can keep the program going. We go to Bill in Panhandle.
Good morning, Mr. T.
Hello there.
This morning tried to access a web page, and access was denied me, but the tagline was, Reid urging Obama to make 90 recess appointments. Have you any idea what those appointments are?
No, I don't know. Obviously, this has been a big controversy, especially with the Senate, because the Senate is the one that has to confirm appointments under our Constitution, and some of those appointments have not gotten through. The confirmation process in the Senate is broken. It was true with President Bush. It's true with President Obama. But that does not mean that any president ought to go around the Constitution. They just need to figure out a way to fix that process. But I don't know the specifics because I didn't see the headline.
Okay, Bill, appreciate your call. We've talked a lot about this whole redistricting mess and how much it is complicating the lives of elected officials and those who would like to be elected officials. How much is this bearing on you and your day-to-day work, or in your preparation for the election, or the preparation for the congressional agenda and all that?
Well, I think for me, I've got a job to do, and my first responsibility is to do the job I was already elected to do, and the election has to come second to that. I think the bigger impact at this stage is Texas's role in choosing a Republican nominee for the presidency. If we'd been part of Super Tuesday, we would have been a big player. Now they're talking about the end of May at the earliest. I don't know if it'll still be going. It may still be going then. I don't know. But I think that's the biggest impact right now, plus just the uncertainty of whether people turn out to vote at a strange time of the year. And so that's I think that'd be the other factor.
Speaking of the presidential election, as a Republican, are we in a time when we are actually seeing the party, its future at stake in terms of which course it's going to take? You know, if you look at Romney versus Santorum, let's win the moderate versus no, we have to have very conservative ideals. Is this really all that critical an election, or maybe all of them this way?
I don't think it's that critical in the sense of it determines what the future of the Republican Party is. I do think it is critical in terms of whether President Obama is reelected or not. And if you look at all of the issues that are going to be decided one way or another right after the election, whether it's the tax law that's extended, or whether it is raising the debt ceiling, or whether it's implementing the Obama health care bill, the outcome of the election will do so much to shape the future of this country. who and the appointee to EPA. I mean, just go down through the regulations. All of those things are going to be decided by this election. So I think that is the reason that some people say it's the most important election in our lifetime. And for me, what matters most is who has, from a Republican standpoint, who has the best chance to win.
Okay, we got about 30 seconds left, but I know you're going to give some folks an opportunity today to learn just how difficult working on the federal budget is. Tell us about that.
Concord Coalition is a nonpartisan group that does this around the country, and they basically we're going to use some WT students, and they're going to make the tough budget decisions and figure out what they'd cut, what they'd add to, and what the effect it would have on the deficit. People can do this themselves by going on the Concord Coalition website, taking the little survey, and it's a great way to not only look at options, but to understand kind of where the money is as far as the federal government goes.
Okay. Congressman Thornberry, we appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, sir.